Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another Power Hour. I am Monica Sikora, and joining me today, as usual, is my fantastic colleague, Isha Patel. Hi, Isha.
Hello, double duo dream team we are.
We are. I think we should get an absolute stable slot every week. I think we are. But yeah, that's just my petition there.
It's all good.
Isha, I think this one is a good one, but then I always think that. But I think this one is a really good one, especially judging on where we are in a year and the year that we've had so far. So naturally, the pandemic, still all the problems that we had with people having problems with their immune systems. We're going to talk a little bit more about what we can do to boost that immune system's activity and to make sure that we're doing our bit to stay away from any forms of viruses and viruses mostly that are lurking around every corner right now.
Absolutely, yeah, it's everywhere. Hand sanitizers, everything isn't at the moment.
Absolutely. So from the nutrition standpoint, and I think nutrition is a huge one when it comes to the immunity, what are some main basic principles when it comes to having that immune system working in a tip-top condition?
So definitely with what we're eating, it's important that you're not going to suppress the immune system, particularly your T fighter cells. And lots of studies have found that a low-fat, high-carb diet is better for the immune system. Lots of people at the moment are eating high fats, particularly the kind of like processed foods, deep fried foods. That is actually going to suppress the immune system. There are carbohydrates, particularly the low glycemic whole grain carbs, which are good in kind of regulating the immune system like they do with metabolizing and the glucose system. It's all kind of in chain, but it helps maintain the upright of the immune system. So if you can try and have whole grain rice and pasta, quinoa, millet, buckwheat, teff, all ancient grains, gluten-free, that would be really good. And try to have an abundance of fruits and vegetables. Lots of fruits and vegetables have anti-inflammatory properties. They're high in antioxidants, which again we are known to fight free radicals, which are quite good. And they also help the good gut bacteria, which actually do help the immune system. Our gut bacteria actually make short-chain fatty acids. So whilst they're making these short-chain fatty acids, they produce things like butyrate, which are good for inflammation, and they feed the bacteria that help to fight off any infections and make you vulnerable to conditions like flus and infections and things. And then there's also the micronutrients, so your mineral traces and vitamins, particularly vitamin D and iron, zinc, selenium, and vitamin C, as we all know. And I always say to my clients to cook with spices as much as possible. Lots of herbs with spices because they're really good to kind of battle off colds, coughs, and like the kind of like congestion you have in your throat and chest. Turmeric is my favorite because it's anti-inflammatory, antiseptic, it's just all around antimicrobial, anti-everything. It's really good. So try and help it as much as you can. And then I'd say ginger's really good, garlic's really good. So lots of these foods help.
And where do you stand? Because that's some real life question from one of my clients. Where do you stand when it comes to the temperature of the food? Does it matter whether we eat more hot foods, or is it kind of all the same and it's all about the nutrients?
It's all about the nutrients, but I guess when it's cold and you're already feeling quite bunged up, it's quite soothing to have warm food. So I always say soups and stews are really good. Not only is it soothing, but it kind of just feels good and it's digested easier. When we're ill, our digestion tends to be impaired. So if you are eating warm cooked foods, it'll be easier to digest and break down in the body.
Okay, that's really interesting. And you mentioned something about gluten. So you mentioned that's worth including some, gluten-free grains. Why gluten-free, especially for people that don't have intolerance or celiac disease? Is that still applicable to those people?
Yeah, so I mean, if you do eat gluten and you're fine, you can have it in moderate doses. The only reason I say to cut gluten out is because the protein it contains is called zonulin. It's quite harsh on the stomach and the stomach lining. The more we wear out the stomach lining, the more nutrients pass through and the less are getting absorbed into the cells we need to fight and help pick up and regulate our immune system.
That's very interesting. That's really interesting. I think there's a lot of correlations between the exercise and nutrition during the winter periods, during that so-called cold and flu season that we're in right now. What I wonder is the vitamin D as well, the famous vitamin D that we know by now, obviously that's super important for our immune system. We also know for all of us who don't happen to live in Spain or in a really hot climate, we definitely don't get enough of it during the winter period. One of the things that you can do, which I'm a big advocate of, is to go outside during the daytime, soak up some sun, and in the meantime, get some exercise out. And I think that is a great way of not only getting some vitamin D in, but also getting that fresh air, which will make a difference to how you feel both mentally and the strength of your immune system. So we'll talk a little bit more about the immune system response to exercise in a second. But is it worth supplementing vitamin D during the winter period?
100%. I would say everyone needs it. Particularly those that are kind of Asian, African, Caribbean skin tones, because we don't get enough sunlight absorbing it anyway. But yeah, everyone should, as a minimum take, I think it's 1,000 micrograms a day. So yes, with that. It also helps the T cells, so it reduces susceptibility to infections and particularly respiratory tract infections. That's why it's so good. Yeah, I would say absolutely.
Part of the reason why we're advocate exercising for the immune system is because it's magical influence on our inflammation levels. And obviously, as much as some may argue that exercise and inflammation go hands in hands, and the inflammation response in the body is what actually allows our body to heal and get better and stronger each time we exercise. However, that's the acute inflammation in response to the injury of an otherwise healthy immune system. The one that we're looking at that we want to level the levels of is the chronic inflammation. And that is where the magic combination of the exercise and nutrition comes in handy. And there's the chronic inflammation levels that are increasing the risk of us catching any kind of a nasty flu and other viruses that are lurking around right now. So from the nutrition standpoint, what can we do to lower inflammation levels?
So for that, you will kind of follow an anti-inflammatory diet, predominantly of good quality proteins that have organic meats, such as fish, eggs, and also healthy fats. So you're kind of following a paleo keto type diet, and you're incorporating lots of healthy fats, cooking with olive oil, coconut oil, you're adding in the avocados, lots of nuts and seeds like chia, hemp, flax seeds, every nut possible, and that is really the way to reduce inflammation, as well as adding in the herbs and spices into your cooking.
That's really important. That's where the turmeric comes back in. That's how our love for curry is particularly beneficial for us. On the exercise standpoint, it's one of the interesting facts, and controversially also coming from a Chinese research done in 2018, is that people exercising at least 3 times a week had the 26% lowered risk of developing any cold and flu related upper tract respiratory diseases. So it's really important in the current climate to make sure that where we can, we get that moderate level exercise and that solid diet looked after, because I think this year more than any other before, it is really important that we're looking after ourselves and those ones next to us. I'm very often getting asked about exercising outdoors during winter, and a lot of people have a hard time kind of adjusting to the colder temperature / it's off-putting for them to actually do it. So you won't be really surprised to hear that there is no particular contraindication for you to work out during the winter period or cold temperatures. However, there are some precautions that you need to take, especially if you're not used to it. So there's a whole area of people that have been exercising regularly throughout the years during the winter time. And there's obviously people that have not been very regular / not been exercising outdoors during the winter time. And what very often happens is that tend to go too fast, too soon, don't remember about the basic principles of how to get ready, and they end up catching a cold as a result of it. So I'm going to give you some very basic tips on how to go about it to make sure that you actually improve the immune system response and not to hinder it. So one of the main things about getting outdoors is a proper gear. And what I mean by proper gear is nothing fancy, nothing expensive. It doesn't matter what brand you're using. It's about making sure that we are dressed up correctly. So especially if we're talking about the winter period or particularly cold weather, we're looking at making sure that our extremities are warm and protected during our, for example, runs. So one of the key things that I would say, something that for some people may be obvious, for some not, is to make sure that we have a waterproof footwear. The amount of times I'm seeing people running in the rain with the knitted trainers, and you can literally see how soaked the shoes are. If you're not used to exercising in extreme conditions, this is your way, your ticket to end up with a cold. So please make sure that you have socks, proper footwear that is waterproof, and that is already the first step for you to have your feet prepared, warm and dry. Another thing is layers. So obviously, as you start working out, you'll be a little bit colder. As you warm up and as you go through it, you start heating up. So there might be a situation where you need to take a layer off or on, depending on where you are in your workout. So it's always really wise to prepare yourself for that eventuality and have multiple layers on you so you can adjust accordingly. Obviously, it's very easy. You don't want to be wearing huge jackets and something that will stop you from running or exercising, but it's easy to go for an under layer, a top and a hoodie on top of that so you can adjust accordingly. And that way you can cover all the bases. Obviously, if there's weather forecasting, the rain, please make sure you have something waterproof. Again, especially if you're not used to working out in a fairly extreme conditions. So another thing that might not be super obvious is your hat and the gloves. So in the winter months, this is where we lose majority of our heat, because these are obviously the areas that are most exposed to cold, and these are also the areas that we need to protect. So in order to make sure that our body doesn't come from that overheated to overly cold place, we want to make sure that the head is warm in the hat and the gloves are on your fingers and your hands, so we're keeping those extremities nice and warm. And lastly, the preparation. You may want to spend a little bit more time warming up. So you can do your warm up at home, and that means that you want a warm environment so the warm up doesn't have to be as long. But you might also want to do the warm-up as you're already outside. And one of the tricks that I like using in the wintertime is the use of a resistance band. So resistance bands and performing a few upper and lower body movements with the band make sure that you warm up quicker, which as a result of that, you don't spend long periods of time kind of standing on a patch of grass and wasting the time that you could be already moving and generating more heat. So depending on where you're warming up, you either can warm up at home or you can warm up outside. If you're doing that outside, try to use some resistance band or some more energetic exercises to make sure that you're making up for the colder temperature outside. And most importantly, enjoy it.
Yeah, that's important always.
It's different. But I think what you'll find as well is, especially as we're spending all those months at home, it's nice to go outside, and it's just our way of spending some time outside the house, which is now our workplace, our living space. And living space. So I think it's a very good excuse to get out there, get some fresh air, and boost that both mental and physical well-being.
And Monica, how important would you say it is to go outside? I mean, I've had a client who was cooped up for 3 or 4 months. They did not leave their house, and then they left the house for like 10, 20 minutes, and they came back and they had a headache and like a sore throat for a few days. So that just shows how much of your immune system is compromised just by being cooped up for like 3 months. So how important would you say is to go out every day and just kind of do breathing for like 5 minutes or get some fresh air?
It could not be more important right now. It could not be more important. And I think also our fresh air and open spaces is the easiest way to stay safe. We know obviously that the virus can travel, that the COVID virus can travel and be an airborne disease, so it can travel in air droplets. However, you're more likely to find an open space when there's no one in near proximity to you to just have a moment to sit down and breathe. And we also have to remember the principles of how our immune system strengthens. It's very similar to how our muscles strengthen, which means that we have to create an amount of damage to create the immune response. So we have to keep on challenging that immune response in order for it to stay in a tip-top position. So when we can't just kind of sit back and think that it's going to do the job for us, especially when there's more people, more substances attacking it these days. We have to allow it to do its job and practice. So when it actually meets the pathogens that we want it to respond to correctly, it has a chance and has been prepared to deal with that. So it's really important that we don't kind of wrap ourselves in a plastic blanket where we can, obviously. We don't want to put ourselves in dangerous, harmful situations. But we do want to make sure that where we can, we're boosting our immune system's ability to create that response. So by any means, go outside, even if it's for 5-10 minutes every day. Even if you have a luxury of having a terrace or a balcony, go out there, make sure you get some fresh air each day, because both for your mental and physical well-being, it is crucially important that we don't leave going outside for months. Then exactly what you described, we're at risk of developing quite a bad reaction pretty much the moment we step out of the house.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, like you're talking about, our mental function, just touching on that, stress itself, being cooped up can cause stress. Being in front of your computer, you lose track, so people tend to overwork. And this stress in itself can decrease your immune system. So there's studies that have found high levels of stress have been associated with a decreased response to a flu vaccination, and they've got increased risks of lung infection. So stress management is, the one that's kind of best, because it's increasing our flu vaccination responses, as well as increasing our immune system and the ability to fight these infections.
Absolutely. And we have to remember, everything that we're trying to get out of being outside is provided to us during the daytime. So the one thing that I would suggest, if you can, whether that is during the lunchtime break or whether that is before you start work, go outside during the daylight. So again, you have a better chance of getting even a little bit of that vitamin D, and your mental well-being is actually positively affected by seeing the daylight and by not existing in the darkness of the room and then the darkness of the night when the dawn starts. So it's really important that we allow both our eyesight, our skin, and our full body to experience a little bit of a daylight and get some fresh air in. So it's something that if I had to prescribe one thing for everyone right now, get outside at least 10 minutes every day, whenever you want to do it. Go for a walk, even if you don't want to go for a full workout, go for a walk and then do your workout at home if that's what you prefer. But do make sure you don't get yourself locked down in the house and you don't see the daylight for months at the end, because that in the long term will cause more damage.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many other kind of lifestyle factors that can affect our immune system. So sleep is one. Lots of people don't sleep enough, or they sleep cycles are now disturbed. But the less you sleep, the weaker your circadian rhythm is, and that is related to increased risk of infections and flus and viruses. So try and get at least 7 to 8 hours of good quality deep sleep. Watch your weight, because if you are overweight and more on the obese side, you are more at risk of getting respiratory tract infections, and you have a decreased immune response to flu and viruses. So these things do come into play. Of course, drinking and smoking excessively is also another factor.
Yes, I think from all the talks we had already, you probably know that we're not fans of the two. Definitely, this is the time. If you want to kick up the habit, definitely this is the time to do it. It's never too late to stop smoking or limit your drinking. And I think if you need an extra motivation, this is probably the year and time to do it right now. And also on the note of rest, it's very important that we don't turn exercise into a punishment in this time of the year. So very often, and I've worked with many people that have really highly stressed jobs, or they have really poor sleeping patterns. And in a way of making up for the tired body is to tire it down even more. And that's, again, another short way to catching an infection, because you, again, lower that immune system response to cope with the external stimulus. So what is really important is that as we're working out and as we're trying to boost that body's immunity, we're also allowing the body to rest. So we're feeding it with well nutrients and we're getting adequate amount of sleep. And we're also, to our best ability, looking at limiting the amount of stress we're getting. I know it's hard these days, and I know we all have our own stresses, but it is all a 360 approach to health. It's not a one thing that's going to keep you healthy. You have to look at your body and your lifestyle from all factors to make sure that nothing is jeopardizing the good efforts of the other side.
Totally.
Isha, are we missing anything? Is there anything else that we need to let our lovely audience know?
No, so I guess, diet, try to eat lots of healthy fats, vitamin D, sunlight, or get a mood lamp, which will help. I also find salt lamps are quite effective in that feel-good warmth, so they're quite good. Weight management, stress management, I think we've covered it all.
Moderate exercise. Go outside where you can, even if you don't exercise outside. Go for a walk, sit on the bench, have a few deep breaths in and out, let your lungs get some fresh air. And actually, also, one thing that we didn't touch on is open your windows.
Yeah.
Open your windows is a great practice to do it after you wake up in the bedroom and before you go to sleep. I know some people have a hard time doing it, but it's actually fantastic to get some fresh, even cold air into your bedroom before you go to sleep, and I can guarantee you'll sleep like a baby. So especially if you're having a hard time falling asleep, try that. It will be a good motivation to fall asleep. But make sure that fresh air is a big part of your day. So whether it is to open the windows, go on your balcony, go outside, don't get locked indoors, because the moment you then go out, you're at the greater risk of catching some nasty things we don't want you to catch.
Absolutely.
Lovely. Well, guys, if you have any questions at all, please leave them in the comment section below, and tune in for the next week's tips.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you.